Okay, no opens from anybody. Last week there was an open from Liansheng, and it had something to do with the self-describing block. Did we ever take care of his open? Doesn't sound like it, so I will leave that on here. Okay, and no other opens. Okay, do we know what we would like to have for a future topic? So in 2 weeks, what would we like to have?
I think there was a request for some, thoughts on, directions around things like FSP. So that's a potential topic.
Do you know who would be doing the FSP?
You can sign me up for now, and then if it's not me, I'll find someone. But I can speak to it.
I will put you down, and if you can find somebody, you can let me know beforehand.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. And so our next meeting will be May 4th. So May the 4th be with you. And
I like it.
And so with that really pretty much conducts all of the previous business. So we'll go ahead and let Tonglan go ahead and tell us about configuration.
Right, yeah, sure, Mickey. So let me share my screen. Yeah, let me know once you can see.
Yep.
Okay. Yes. Is there any request for me to go full screen, or you guys are okay with this? Yeah, I think yes, no. So yeah, I think because it's easier to navigate this way. So yeah, I'm just gonna talk about YAML configuration today. Other than me, actually there's a couple of folks who contributed a lot to these configuration initiatives, and Maurice and Brockman, Bob, Christine, Chessel, Ray, and of course a lot of other folks who also give very good inputs. And yeah, I think this configuration work has been evolved quite a lot, since last year when we started with some very simple problem statements and some follow-up discussions with the PLL work group led by Vincent. So that's kind of the background, and today's presentation I'm going to cover a couple of things. So first of all, why do we even do this at the first place? And secondly, I'm going to talk about why are we using YAML of so many other different formats and other different configuration mechanisms. And third, I'm going to talk about what we did last year and what are some of the plans that we're going to do this year, and also some invitations to collaborate with the open source community. All right, so I think starting from the background, I think many of us would be already aware that with so many different firmwares, so many different configuration mechanisms, and that there's just simply too many things that we have to follow, and there's too many formats, files in order to modify a very simple configuration parameters. Sometimes it's also very difficult to know which configuration take place without touching the source code. So, if let's say one day either validation or end user comes to and say, hey, I want to modify something. Yeah, I think BIOS menu is one way to go, but sometimes there's also some other ways to do things that is not so straightforward without looking at the source code. So I think this has been one of the pain points. And yeah, with a lot of different configuration mechanisms, it's also hard to know that what is a single final source to understand the full configs. So sometimes the files are kind of scattered everywhere, so it's a little bit hard to find. And yeah, some of the tools are also closed source, so it's released in an executable manner. right? And yeah, we hope to provide some ways to have some open source tools. So these pain points kind of motivate us to think about, you know, some of the configuration approach today. And yeah, we want to try to focus on the customer experience, on, you know, some of the pain points that is available in the current tools and mechanism, and hopefully we can figure out something to address some of this, right? Okay, so I think moving next, and feel free to stop me anytime if you want to provide any feedback or questions, right? Yeah. So now comes to YAML, right? Why YAML? And I wouldn't say YAML is like, you know, the best language in the world, and you know, this is going to be the way to go for the next 20 to 30 years. But as of today, I think YAML is kind of the choice when we think about the answer to some of our problems. And of course, you know, if let's say there's any better proposal, and you know, we are more than happy to you know, see if there's any potential, right? And yeah, to further enhance this. The reason why we choose YAML is because, first of all, it's very human readable. So if you stare at the format, you can basically understand it without somebody explaining to you. And secondly is the long history. So of course, with long history, it comes with the goodness of having very solid support libraries across different languages. And third of all, I think this is also one of the very important key points is very compatible with JSON. In fact, one of the official spec actually calls out the JSON support. So yeah, as I mentioned, a lot of reference, and with the compatibility, JSON actually opens up a lot of potentials if you want to exchange of data, you know, using web interface and so on, right? So, and last but not least, I think this is also one of the important key points is we are inspired by, you know, the IRTG Slim bootloader configuration approach. So right now, I think Slim boot has been using YAML for bootloader configuration for a while. So we want to see, you know, how can we actually scale this to other configuration as well. Okay. So moving forward, this is what we did in 2021. I think first of all, when we are looking at YAML to configure Slim bootloader, we are thinking of, you know, whether we can revamp some of this approach to FSP, right? So as we all know today, FSP, before this initiative, FSP is configurable using a tool called binary configuration tool. And that tool is released in a closed source, right? So nobody can enhance or you know, make any modification on it. So it just, you know, you take the tool as is, and yeah, and if things doesn't work, then you know, maybe you file a ticket for support. I think yeah, this approach might not be very favorable from open source perspective. So I think with this, we created a Python-based tool, config editor. So actually, this tool has been heavily used in Slim bootloader today. It's just that right now we revamp this tool to also be able to support FSP configuration. Yeah, so this is one of the example, right? So with this FSP snapshots, you can see that there's FSP-T, you know, CPU, you know, and whatever. Right? So the FSP-TM as yeah, all this is configurable using the tool. So the initial BSF format is also revamped to YAML. So BSF is also running a format that is a little bit hard to understand. So with YAML, I think yeah, people can directly understand what each of them means. So the key point here is first, I think is able to support all the existing FSP binaries. But if let's say today you're using a BSF format, yeah, you don't need to panic as well, because we create some functions to backward compatible with BSF. So there's like a converter we implemented to convert the existing BSF to YAML format. So you can also still use it with this open source tool config editor. So all the existing the binary configuration tool function is also able to be supported in this version of config editor, like displaying the FSP informations and so on. And we also take in some of the feedback, you know, from the pain points of the existing BCT to extend some of the useful functions, such as like search functions. Sometimes you have like hundreds of parameters and you don't know where it resides. You have to spend time scrolling them. So this search function will come in handy. So at the top right corner of the tool, you can see that there's, you can just type in the text to find, hit the search button, then yeah, it will just show up, all the parameters that can be configured. Yeah. And also, there are some other useful functions like the binary and configuration file delta detection. Like for example, sometimes you make some modification to your binaries, but you kind of forget what did you change. You can actually use this to dump out the list of the changes from the original delta, from the original config file with the binaries that you change, and then the tools will tell you, what have you changed from there. Yeah, and then thirdly, I think there are also some of these FSP header detection in like 2 to 3 copies. Sometimes we have like fallback mechanisms or capture update, the kind of use case. So this can also handle it. Right. So yeah, I think we did this work back in last year. We tried to did some POCs on some of the platforms, and we are able to intercept some of these future roadmaps, right? And then so there's some specifications and presentations and demo video being done here. So yeah, we also plan to, with this work, we also did something on this BIOS configuration. So we kind of like show, some of these BIOS menu today. We can actually also display it using YAML format. Without having to boot the platform. So if let's say you're coming from validations or you just simply want to understand what is the default being set for a particular configuration, you can actually just use the config editor, which is open source, and the YAML file, and then you can see all the configurations. Yeah, so this is one of the things that we did last year. So moving forward, I think from this year perspective, right? So I think there's some of the use case that we're evaluating, and some of the work and discussion that has been going on, and I kind of, call out some of these example, like for example, this BIOS menu, cell menu. I think we did a POC. But we also wanted to do some other POCs on, other than server, maybe we look into clients and, trying to see if there's any, things that we can enhance there. There's also some of these structured PCD to YAML conversions that we are also trying to do a POC here. And also, maybe we can use the same flow that YAML can generate some BIOS binaries, and we can put it inside the general BIOS build flow. So some of these discussion has been going on with respective people who are working on it, right? But as we have more and more formats to converge and the flows to standardize, I think that there's some scaling problems, because if every request results in writing the script from scratch, I think it's not really the way that it was intended since the beginning. So I think it kind of like triggers to have like an object-oriented programming design for it. So we kind of put some thoughts, and later in the subsequent slides, I will share some of the thoughts that we put in, and yeah, we also welcome people to contribute to this or make this design better. Yeah. So with this, I think we also, some of the plans is also to continue to support future FSP changes, right? So as we know, the spec will keep evolve, and sometimes it includes header and format changes. So yeah, we also want the tools to be able to support this. And yeah, there's also some interesting presentations and information to the CBOR for more efficient config block and data management. So I think this could also be one of the potential area to explore here. Okay, so that kind of summarized the plan that we have in mind for 2022. And then, these are some of the informations that we are thinking about, incorporating some of these build generation process, like YAML in part of the VFR conversion to the final, data binaries and FFS, right? So YAML would be, one of the solutions that people can configure, and in order to generate the final data that is going to be in the build. So secondly, I think these are some of the very sketchy class diagram that we have, at the beginning to trigger some of the discussions. Like for example, as we know, the firmware data today, it has a lot of different type of combinations. For example, sometimes we look at some combo fields, some integer fields and padding fields and others. Sometimes we deal with parameters that involve drop-down menus, or sometimes we have to key in the parameters, and sometimes we have to have a list of options for for people to take and think, things like that, right? So we're kind of trying to create like a field builder, like a factory design that it can based on the data structure, it will like generate a different fields, and essentially all these different fields that's being created, based on the data, will be concatenated and create a full list. So this is kind of like the data structures that will be generated when any format is being parsed in to understand. So building on top of that, we also have a parser and serializer, putting in some thoughts here. So the parser is more like, when we're trying to understand some data. For example, let's say today we are dealing with USF for FSP, and maybe, we also have some DSC to understand. And maybe, if you're looking at BIOS menu, we have VFR to understand. And maybe if you look at PCD, then we have structured PCD, and we probably need a PCD parser. And if you look at it in YAML, then we have YAML to understand, right? So each of these would essentially be like a parser child class that could be implemented to flatten out the data into this config field builder. So as long as we are dealing with a new format that we need to understand, then we will try to flatten it to these data attributes. And essentially, all these attributes will inherit all the goodness that we already implemented for the serializer. So if you think about serializer from firmware formats, right? So when we deal with data, of course, we need to generate the binaries. So the binaries essentially, arrange those data together. And then sometimes we also need to have some header files that will describe the offsets of the data. So from the serializer is kind of the way that all these data are being represented. And sometimes also, if let's say we need to debug, then we have a map file. So we can have each of these serializer as a child class as well. So if we want to create binary out of it, then we have a child class for the serializer. So imagine this, right? If let's say this design is completed, and we already support a particular formats, and then we are able to flatten out the data and serialize it in binary, header, YAMLs, and map files. That means if tomorrow if somebody say, oh, I have format X that I want to also be able to generate a binary or header or something like that, right? So all we need to do is just add one more parser for that new format, and then generally, as long as that parser can generate this field list, all the serializer will be able to be inherited, right? That means it will be able to generate any of these. So with this with this flow, I think we can achieve some kind of standardization on how these formats can converge and generate a standardized format. Yeah. So this is kind of how it looks like, as like an end goal. So probably we have like a couple of parser and then a couple of serializer, and each of these parsers can use whatever serializer that's already implemented. Yeah. Okay, so with that, I kind of end my content here, and I'd like to call for the invitation to collaborate, right? So if let's say you currently you are experiencing some pain points in your configuration, so yeah, please feel free to reach out. I think yeah, I'm more than happy to hear some of these pain points and see maybe some of these design can help in any sense. And yeah, and secondly, if let's say we open source some of these designs of these works that we do, would it help with your pain points, right? Yeah, please let us know, because if let's say we do see good values, and yeah, we can open source this as soon as at the phase of implementing it. And third, and last but not least, I think I like to call, right, if let's say you are keen to collaborate in making any of these design better, maybe some of the points that I described makes you feel like, oh, this is not the best way of doing things. Yeah, please let me know. Yeah, we are more than happy to change. Yep. So yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, thank you. But basically, when we using FSP, right? I know FSP in the bus, they using bus means menu to config, but for other bootloader, core or Slimboot, they depends on their FSP UPD description. But from our experience, lots of FSP UPD in the help information, it is not described correctly, and so that one will impact even the YAML usage, right? That YAML usage also depends on their FSP UPD information. Do you work with the FSP team and try to improve it in the new generation? This is question one.
So maybe let me capture this, right? So if I rephrase the question correctly, so you say sometimes the FSP UPD for bootloaders might be incorrect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This the bias doesn't really depend on this FSP UPD description. But lately, if we need to make it more detailed for bootloader to use, right?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of points here. So first of all, if let's say the config, the binary UPD binary itself, let's say the offset is being skewed or something like that, right? If we use the old tool, BCT, it will just crash. But right now, I think with config editor, I think it will tell you which offset misaligns, and I don't think the config will be able to fix that, but catching it, I think definitely we can do something about it. Maybe catch some of the data mismatch. Actually, when I first started this, I do run into some of the problems that you mentioned. Like, for example, some of the data for the FSP is actually wrong. Like, for example, if let's say you have this drop down options that provide you if let's say you're able to configure between value 0, 1, 2, and then however in the binary is actually stored with some values that is like out of the range. Yeah, I think sometimes some of this actually happens, and we need the provider of the FSP to fix it. But from the config standpoint, the config editor is able to have the capability to catch some of these exceptions and say, oh, your data for this particular field is invalid. So we could use this as a data point to drive for this UPD correction.
Yeah, for the data type, yeah, maybe we can capture by the tool. But if the help information is not correct, we need the FSP owner, really improve it lately.
Thanks.
Yeah, and another one, from your picture, your POC looks you have different page for the FSP UPDs, right? Since FSP is released, FSP header is like a flat in a flat format. Did you make some change to the FSP to have different page show different FSP UPDs?
You mean
Yeah,
this one?
like this one. You have like a debug CPU, ME, this kind of thing, right? So how you, page them differently?
Yeah, I think we implement the DSC parser. I think is based on some of the similar input, like how last time the BSF is being generated. So there is some lines in the code, like those FSP DSC files. So the page is also generated from that input.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if you only give you the FSP header file, you cannot generate this
The
format.
page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
No. Yeah. No.
Okay.
Yeah. It's yeah.
There. So, does anybody else have any questions?
For the new parser config edit tool, you already upstreamed to EDK2 repo, right?
Yes. Yes.
Is
That's right.
it in the FSP package or in the base tool base tool?
It's in the FSP. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, lately looks Scaleable also need to be sync with this tool. We don't want to make them both, right?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. I think. Yeah. If let's say we can converge and we'll probably have to try out because I'm not sure if there's any new changes in the Slimboot branch. Yeah, we'll probably able to sync it up and just use this one version.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point though you allude to, right? Since the YAML-based configuration is a multi-bootloader, having it homed in a EDK2 package, is that sufficient for folks? Or maybe at some point, maybe it could be its own independent repo or project that all the other bootloaders could point to. Might help with alignment, right? People could then pull it as a submodule or something. But have you, Tung, seen any issues with it being sort of curated in EDK2, or no one's really complained yet?
Yeah, I think there is also some thoughts there because right now I think the config editor is in this folder, the FSP folder, and some of these efforts, right, to standardize, some of the future parsers and serializer, we might want to exercise them in the build process. So we are not sure whether the FSP2 is the good place to put, or it got to be in the base tool, or like what you said, right? Maybe we create a different place to host it, and then we call it a submodule. I think all the path is possible, and there's not right or wrong. It's more like a very subjective manner of treating it, right? Yeah.
In fact, the software architecture, it's pretty self-contained. It's more just more of a, like you said, subjective, and maybe weighing some of the other community considerations. And it's not an immediate urgency either, I'm guessing. It's not blocking you making progress either, but it might be worth a discussion down the road. Okay.
Yeah. I think the plan is, once we realize some of these flows, and then we can start to think about, where to put them in a ways that can be way more acceptable to the community.
Yeah, previously, I think Lingshen and also the USF payload issues, they mentioned one to FSP and the payload configuration could be consistent. I don't know exactly the mean. I asked Lingshen, he is also not very clear. Basically, currently, at least the FSP for them, if we move to using YAML, and also that is for the FSP input, and for the FSP output to the bootloader, it would use the hub. So and for the payload part, it is very similar, right? For the input to the I mean, for the bootloader input, basically, it is also hub. Currently, if we configure the bootloader, we also, for Scalable, we also using the YAML. So, but at the same time, they also mentioned the self-describing format that original that one they mentioned is for their output. I mean, from the bootloader to the payload, to use the YAML or there's something now we mentioned that using the Scalable, right? Instead of the current hub. But if we use the, I mean, Scalable, then Corporate still use the FS hub, it would not be consistent. So I don't know. I mean, the final decision or I mean comments. At least there is a little confusion from the community what they really want to do. That's why we don't really move from the hub for the universal payload. We keep it at ease until we get agreement from most of the community.
And I think that makes a lot of sense. So maybe, you know, what we've been trying to do in these USF community meetings is go through the whole, you know, public portion of the USF stack, and, you know, we'll converge on that with next week's FSP. And so once we've done sort of a lap or a review of all the layers, maybe then we can have a follow-on session on, you know, convergence or cross-layer issues, including, you know, payload, FSP, platform code configuration, and YAML to CBOR. And if we did self-describing, we'd want to coordinate maybe evolving every layer versus one layer having one work data flow of CBOR, but still hobs somewhere else. Yeah, I think having that harmonization discussion, Longto, makes a lot of sense. So maybe that could be our follow-up meeting once we reviewed all the layers of the USF stack as of next meeting, and we could have that sort of those holistic opens, and maybe that could even be a meeting topic, because then we'll have all of the layers of the USF stack in view. So that's a really good observation you make, and maybe that's a plan going forward. Is we'll touch FSP next meeting, and then the meeting after can be these sort of holistic architectural alignment questions, including the one you just mentioned.
Yeah.
I think that is actually a good point. And also that like just now, I think this point actually I don't know what is making a lot of sense here, because I was just showing the FSP folders, right? So this is where Intel hosted all the FSP binaries. I don't know how the payload is going to fit in this.
Not a location. It is like an interface.
Interface. Okay.
Yeah, interface input output for them or configure like this can be consistent.
I see. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Then I think we need a more thorough review on this.
Okay. There any more questions or any more conversations about anything? Quick one. That was really good presentation today, Tonglun. And
Alright,
so,
thanks, Sophie.
Thanks for putting it together. Really good.
yeah. So if nobody else has anything else, we can call it a day. I will stop recording. Okay.